As you're already aware, late Sunday evening, May 7th, 2017, officers of the Elkhart Police Department were participating in a pursuit involving an individual that one officer had observed engaging in some rather dangerous driving behavior as well as another traffic infraction. And they began a pursuit on the outer west side of the county, just west of the city of Elkhart. This was in the general area of Holiday Place and County Road 20, Boggo Township. As the primary officer continued the pursuit, another officer from the Norfolk Southern Railroad Police Department heard the traffic and assisted the original officer. The pursuit was traveling north on County Road 100 at that point when it crossed over County Road 20 again, and the individual in the vehicle that was fleeing entered into private property, into a private yard, and continued trying to flee from law enforcement officers. At that point in time, these officers were attempting to block that vehicle from getting back out onto the public roadways and back out into the traffic areas. And one of the officers engaged in discharging his service weapon at the driver of that vehicle. As officers got out of their vehicles and approached the driver got out got out of the vehicle and was restrained as they waited for medical personnel. As they discovered that the driver was actually a 13-year-old juvenile male suffering from a gunshot wound to his shoulder area, they determined that obviously medical attention would be the priority, and they maintained him until medics arrived just a few minutes later. The juvenile was taken into medical custody and taken to the hospital for treatment of his injuries. Obviously, the treatment of the medical injuries was the priority at the time, and that juvenile was maintained at the hospital, and as of right now is currently at the hospital. We do expect him to be released probably later today. At that point in time, the Indiana State Police is likely to take him into custody given the circumstances of this event. As he is 13 years old, then proceedings will have to begin in the juvenile courts, and that obviously is something that will take several days to initiate. Upon his being taken into custody, there will be a detention hearing, and then charges will be filed at a later date. At this point in time, in light of the fact that this was a use of deadly force by a law enforcement officer in which an individual was injured, the Indiana State Police has taken over the investigation and will complete this investigation. Any shooting of this nature, any use of deadly force, obviously is an event that requires a very thorough investigative inquiry. Many people are being talked to, many forms of evidence are being gathered. This will take some time. At this point in time, Norfolk Southern, of course, is cooperative. Elkhart City Police Department is cooperating and assisting in the investigation. Investigators from the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney are also participating. We have been, of course, of assistance to the Indiana State Police in a variety of different ways and will continue that assistance until they complete their investigation and they are able to turn that over to my attention for review. Once the investigation is complete and they do turn it over to my review, then I will review the case to determine if any criminal charges are appropriate or if the shooting is reasonable or justified under the law. However, we are nowhere near that point at this time. The Indiana State Police will need some time in order to complete that investigation, and obviously they are still working on another one just not too long ago. So there will be probably at least a couple of weeks, if not a little bit longer, before we can even determine what will happen next. In the event that a grand jury is necessary, then we will advise if one is being sought. However, at this time it is premature to make that decision. I mentioned that Norfolk Southern Police Department is an officer that was involved in this shooting. The Norfolk Southern Railroad Police are full law enforcement officers in the state of Indiana. Their police powers have existed virtually ever since the railroad began, and they have police powers that are virtually identical to other local police, state police, and that type of thing. Their jurisdiction actually does cross state lines, so it does have a bit of federal jurisdiction as well. They are authorized to carry weapons, they are authorized to investigate criminal offenses, and they are certainly authorized to conduct business in Elkhart County. They have been individuals that have worked alongside other law enforcement that we're used to here in Elkhart County, so this is not something that is new, this is not something that has just started a few years ago. They have actually been around for decades. As I indicated, upon completion of the Indiana State Police investigation, they will submit that complete investigation to my attention, and then we will review it for the purpose of determining whether any criminal charges are necessary and whether the shooting was reasonable and justified. Until that time, however, we will not be releasing any specific facts or any specific pieces of information that could compromise the integrity of that investigation. Obviously, what they need to do comes first, and they need to make sure that the information that they are receiving is in truth factual information and not something that maybe perhaps someone said or heard in the media. So until that time, there will not be a significant amount of factual detail that is released. Are there any questions?
Why did the Norfolk Southern officer join the chase?
He heard the chase going on, and of course, as law enforcement officers know, one person can't do it alone. If you can participate in a safe fashion and you are authorized by law to do so, you will oftentimes see multiple different agencies that participate. We've seen in the past several different situations, for example, where county, city, Goshen, Indiana State Police all participate if they happen to be in the right place at the right time. But everything depends upon what's going on and where it is when the dispatch goes out.
Are you able to say why or how that 13-year-old got a hold of that car?
Not at this time. This is part of the investigation, and of course will be facts that are identified later.
You said that these Norfolk Southern officers have full police powers just like any other officer. Are they trained the same way as any other officer?
Every agency is responsible for their own training. The officer that was involved in this was formerly an Elkhart County Sheriff's Department officer. He's been through the law enforcement certification training. In order to be law enforcement officers, you have to keep up with your training. And so all those things are the responsibility of your respective departments. So can I say he's received exactly the same training as perhaps another agency? No. However, they do certain state standards, and they do have to comply with the yearly updates on standards as well.
Do we know where the driver was shot? Is that something you can release right now?
General area, upper body, but again, not a fatal injury, but due to complications of it and some concerns about what could happen, he maintained in the hospital for the last 2 days for purposes of treatment.
What charges might that young man face?
Obviously, the felony fleeing, but there's some additional charges that may come down depending upon how further information is brought in.
Is the juvenile armed?
That will be released at a later time as well.
And maybe I missed this, Vicki, but was there any indication why the officer shot the young man?
At this point in time, it's premature to release that because the investigation is continuing. Formal statements are still being gathered, as well as a review of additional pieces of evidence. So at this point in time, that will not be released.
And the Norfolk Southern police officer was the only one that opened fire? He's the only one that shot?
That is correct. Yes.
Were those officers aware of how young that man was when they entered into the chase?
There is no reason to believe that they could even view the individual that was driving. And so, of course, they would have no idea as far as age, race, sex, anything like that, because obviously it was dark. They could not see anything. This was approximately 11:10 p.m. at night. And unfortunately, out in the county, there's not a lot of illumination from external sources. They were using police lights and sirens to attempt to pull this driver over. However, the driver did not acquiesce.
Neighbors have said that it was a male. Can we confirm that now that it was a male?
It is a juvenile male, yes.
Is that a stolen vehicle?
I'm not going to comment on that at this point in time.
Do we know how many shots were fired?
More than one, however, specifics I'm not going to release at this point in time.
When we were at the scene yesterday, we saw that there was a bullet hole in a neighboring house. What can you say about the safety of firing a weapon in a residential area in this type of situation?
Obviously, that is an area of concern, which is one of the reasons statutes require that does include being aware of your surroundings, what the risk factor is for purposes of stopping a current threat versus danger to any other people. So the evidence gathering was pretty extensive at the scene, as well as continues at this point in time. And if there were any issues where there were people that were obviously in danger, then that will be a topic that's addressed at a later time.
This may seem like a silly question, but when I drove back over there yesterday, the owner of the yard that this chase kind of ended in, he had mowed the grass. Is that going to make it harder for you to find evidence?
Generally speaking, you want to get it right the first time. And generally speaking, you put a great deal of effort into the front end. And fortunately, our evidence investigators were out there and gathering evidence very quickly after this event occurred. I understand that they were able to complete their assessment of the scene and they had released the scene, so obviously no problem with the homeowner mowing his lawn. Got to beat the rain.
The charges that the juvenile is facing, are those going to be dealt with in juvenile court, or are they going to be moved up to adult court? Has that been decided yet?
It has not been decided yet. They will have to be initiated in juvenile court as the juvenile is of a tender age. Any other questions?
Just the two law enforcement agencies involved, nobody else had had a chance to sort of get involved at that time of the shooting?
You are correct. The only two agencies that were in the vicinity was Elkhart City Police Department and Norfolk Southern Railroad Police Department. Those are the only two involved.
How many Elkhart City officers were involved in the chase?
My understanding is there was one immediate, and then there were others that were joining, but not present at the time of the shooting.
Do we know what that the traffic violation was in the first place?
Yes, we do know. However, at this point in time, we're